Thank you, Senator Pera. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. And clearly there are momentous events occurring outside of this chamber right now. And with all due respect to Senator Peris, I think the Australian people would expect a more considered contribution in that event than simply the stale talking points and sound bites from a staff or opposition leader's office written speech. And if I can say that one of the problems I think we've got in Australian politics over the past few years has been the rise of BlackBerry politics, if you like, that we all tend to simply read points off our mobile phones that get emailed to us in the morning, and I think the Australian people can see through it. I think the Australian people realise it, and we are all suffering because of it. But today I want to start with a bit of history. I want to start with some history because I was reminded on the weekend by Minister Barnaby Joyce. He's a student of history himself. He gave a speech at the Nationals Party convention and he quoted Ecclesiastes, where there's nothing new under the sun. And I certainly think what we're experiencing today is nothing new under the sun as well. Barnaby went on to quote Roman history, and I want to do so too, but a very different part of Roman history. Not sure if Senator Ryan is a student of Roman history, but you might remember Senator Ryan. There was a particularly handsome-looking emperor called Commodus, I think, or otherwise known as Joaquin Phoenix, I think, in the Gladiator. And Commodus was a disaster as an emperor, a disaster, and it was a tyrant and a evil one at that. And the empire was a bit in a mess when he eventually was subject to his fate by the Praetorian Guards. And they installed a guy called Pertinax, and Pertinax promised the Praetorian Guards a massive donative and all this money that he never came through with. And so the Praetorian Guards dealt with him, and he was gone. But the problem was they didn't have a replacement. And instead of simply choosing the best person for the job, they established an auction.
Order.
The Praetorian Guards established an auction at the time. And you might learn something.
Order
Wong,
on my left, Senator Wong.
The Praetorian Guards established an auction.
Well,
they decided to say and say to the Roman people, you decide whoever can pay us the most amount of money can become emperor. And that's what happened. There was an auction between a guy called Sulpicianus, who was the actual father-in-law of Pertinax, and Didius Julianus. And Sulpicianus started the bidding at 5,000 drachmas, but eventually Didius Julianus won it at 6,200. It was an unbecoming act for the empire. It was effectively a standing auction on who could be emperor. And I unfortunately think something is happening with Australian body politic as well at the moment, that we are being subject to a bidding process through polls and popularity, not through the policy consequences of what we are doing. And it is an unbecoming process, and it's not one that I think the Australian people hold us in high regard for doing. And if we continue to enter into this cycle, continue to be slaves to an announcement of polling results every fortnight, the Australian people will continue to think less of us every time. And we should, in my view, in this place, seek to re-establish the trust in this chamber and in the other chamber and in this parliament, a trust that has been deteriorated and downgraded in the past 8 years. And we have become, I think, fat and lazy and complacent on a couple of decades of very good government. And now ourselves, and I think all political parties have been subject to this in the past few years, have failed to show that leadership, that constancy, that consistency, that stability that the Australian people expect of us. And we will not restore our trust until we can rekindle and refine what we did have not that long ago. Now, I also want to make the point that I'm standing as Whip's chair here. I am a Nationals Party senator, and I'm very proud. I won't make comment on other political parties, but I'm very proud that the Nationals Party has had 12 leaders in 95 years. 12 leaders in 95 years. And while those leaders have gone through great tumult and change through decades, there's been a very reliable element of constancy and stability and certainty from the Nationals Party, or before that the Country Party. I remember when you read Nationals Party history, there's a great story when Arthur Fadden lost. Sorry, not Arthur Fadden. Earl Page. Sorry, Earl Page lost the leadership, and then Archie Cameron took over briefly. But there was a bit of tumult at the time, and there was a leadership spill between John McEwen and another gentleman whose name escapes me. He never became leader. John McEwen tied the leadership with this guy. Tied the leadership in 1939, I think it was. 1939. And what they did instead, because it was a tie, they couldn't break the tie, they installed Arthur Fadden as a temporary leader. But then, of course, World War II broke out, and well, I am talking about leadership here, Senator Wong.
Order, Senator. Resume. So you have a point of order, Senator Wong.
I do. It is relevant. I appreciate these are wide-ranging discussions, but the MPI is on the Prime Minister's, Tony Abbott, Mr Abbott, the current Prime Minister's failed leadership.
Yes, Senator Wong.
He hasn't touched on this for some time.
Senator Wong, there is no point of order. This is about leadership, and Senator Canavan is drawing an analogy. Continue, Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. As I was saying, John McEwen lost that leadership battle and Arthur Fadden took over, and as a temporary leader, and eventually made permanent during World War II because of the war. And Arthur Fadden remained leader until 1957. So McEwen was one vote away in 1939, and did not take over as leader until 1957. Now, I, as somewhat of a conservative, do, I suppose, miss perhaps that patience that might have been shown by a different generation. And I do think the Australian people actually also share some frustration with the level of self-centredness and selfishness that sometimes we display in this place. And I can only speak for my own contribution in this place, but I will always try and live up to that example that we should be putting the Australian people first with every decision we make. We should not just be putting the Australian people first, we should be putting the future of our country first, the future of our nation first, and protecting our future generations with an example that demonstrates our ability to run this country in a way that is respectful and consistent over many decades.